Hi, Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Today, I have attorney Josh Dorcey with me. And Josh is here to talk about a crazy, crazy thing that he's done, just crazy. And in our upper level program, Dominate Your Market, one of the challenges, and we issue challenges to get lawyers to think differently about how they practice, to shift their mindset. And one of the challenges that we issue is taking 175 days off a year. And those days are off. No emails, no phone calls, no work, no checking in the office. Those are days that we are off resting, rejuvenating, having fun, just enjoying life and having a great life. And Josh has crushed it, just crushed it. So I invited Josh on to share how he does it so other lawyers can learn how. Other lawyers can tell Josh why it's not possible, even though he's doing it, which they will tell him it's not possible, and just really share his story. So, Josh, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for making time to be here.
Thanks, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
So, let's back up. When did you start the practice?
October of 2007. So if you remember, that was the absolute worst possible time to open a business.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was like, if you could time a bad time to open a business, that was pretty bad. And why did you pick that time?
The firm I started with just wasn't a good home for me. And at that point, it was either I was going to go work for somebody else or I was going to build my own baby.
I love it. I love it. So you're like, I might as well give it a shot. Let's go see what I can do and take a swing at it. And what practice area did you decide to go into and why?
So I decided to go into transactional services. So primarily estate planning, business planning, asset protection planning. And part of that was geographical. I just happened to be in Southwest Florida. So we obviously have more retirees than probably any other state. But also because that was my warmest network of individuals that I could work with were people that were in either the financial industry or the tax world. And so it was kind of that perfect world for me to jump into.
We could spend probably a whole day just pulling ideas out of your brain, like how to do that. But the primary focus of today's podcast is actually what you're doing away from the office. So one of the things I love about you is that, since the theme is great practice, great life, you've been really clear that you built your practice around your great life. So talk to me a little bit about your thinking and strategy there. Why did you do that?
Well, I think one thing is you look at so many business owners, I don't care if it's in the law industry or not, they they're they leave where they're at thinking they can build a better widget or run a business better than their previous boss. And then they wake up 5 years down the road and realize that they all they did was create a job for themselves. And now the business actually controlled them, controlled their life. And you find people not taking vacations, not taking time off, not being able to have self-care, and they have every reason in the book on why they can't going forward. And so I had a great role model in my life, and that was my dad. And my dad's model was to be able to take off at least 3 months every year when I was a kid. And he wasn't able to do it really until I got into those middle school years. But I watched him do it. I watched him run his business successfully. And so I designed my business as much as I could off of what his business was. And that was to make sure my life was as great as it could be. And I also got to have a business that produced a very nice income for me and my family.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So you began with the premise, I'm going to follow my father, my hero, and work with the goal of working for 3 months off a year. I got to tell you, I have to fight with lawyers who've been practicing for 10 years straight to take 3 days off in a row. And you're taking 3 months off in a year. So talk to me about how, when you set up the business, what was your strategy behind, how did you do that? Did you calendar the time off first? How did you do it? What was the thinking? How would you advise or coach or help another lawyer think this through?
So I used a lot of almost by happenstance. I watched the natural flow of my clients. I saw how many clients I had coming in every week and every month. And then I realized that for how many appointments I could have in a given week, that I didn't have enough appointments to fill in 4 full weeks a year. So I realized that if I just jam packed 2 or 3 weeks in, it actually gave me 1 full week a month that I was able to take off. And so once again, it was by happenstance, ran the numbers, figured where I was at, but there was no reason for me to be sitting in an office doing nothing for 10 hours a week when I could just jam pack everything in. And so that's how I started, was just truly analyzing the numbers and saying, okay, if I was going to take time off, what would it need to look like? And then I backed my schedule into that.
So we need to have you investing in you, and you're the typically the greatest asset in most of the firms. And so having you playing at peak performance drives more revenue, drives more business, drives more everything, change, leadership. Having you burned out as kind of a I don't know what a Protestant work ethic model of you need to work 7 days a week, 100 hours a day, it doesn't produce great quality thinking. And that's really what you want to look at, not billable hours, but quality thought, quality thinking, quality leadership. Josh, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so when I was in law school, I had a gentleman that was in his 60s that was actually in my law school class. He had retired as a veterinarian, had gone to Cornell, and he just wanted to be an environmental lawyer. So he went to law school in his 60s just to practice law. And something he told me stuck with me to this point. And he said, Josh, when I was a veterinarian, it took me about the first 5 years of practice to realize that I was a terrible veterinarian from 7 in the morning till 10 in the morning. But if I let myself sleep until I naturally woke up, I was a much better veterinarian. And he said, so I actually that this individual actually took appointments from 10 to 7 every day. That was the time that he was in business. He let himself sleep till he naturally woke up. And I think we've all been trained that we must wake up at the same time as everybody else. We must run our businesses the same way as everybody else. And it doesn't have to be that way. We live in a virtual world. You can set your business up the way that you want to run it. And so from that aspect of taking care of yourself, your own mind, and who you are, that's what makes me a better attorney. I mean, I can tell you for me personally, if I go on a vacation and we are physically active the entire time that I'm away and we're staying up late and we're having a party and we're having a great time, I don't come back relaxed on Monday morning. I'm not a great attorney. And so I've realized that for my vacations to be beneficial, I need to make sure I'm supercharging at the beginning, but the last few days before I come back to work, I need to make sure I'm getting good rest, good sleep, good meditation to make sure that I come back refreshed. And I'll tell you that's one of the biggest mistakes that I've made earlier on is I would take off 2 or 3 weeks and come back tired.
Yep,
Well,
yep, 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 yep.
you know what your staff doesn't want to hear is that you
Yes.
were just off for 3 weeks and they were holding down the fort and you came back dragging, tired.
Yeah. Yep.
They're putting in the extra effort to take care of you because they want you taking care of yourself. And so that's something I had to realize was this time off, I can't go where I'm running a marathon every single time. I've got to make sure I'm coming back and being refreshed so my team is appreciative the fact that I took time off.
So the question is, if we're coaching and talking to a lawyer who's like, dude, I can't even get Fridays off. I can't seem to manage getting a weekend off. I can't seem to go without checking my email 3 or 4 times a day because I have such a either addiction or such stress around being non-responsive. How would you tell them to start, Josh? How would you tell them to start?
So without using names, there's one in my practice growth program that I'm just so proud of because this individual was working nights and weekends and has for years. And I spoke to this individual last week and I asked her, what have you been doing? Have you been working nights and weekends? And she said, you know, Josh, you're not going to believe it. I just scheduled a calendar block that I had to be somewhere else every night with my family. Restaurant reservations, it didn't matter. I just scheduled something every night of the week that I had to be out of the office. And it forced me to leave. And I said, and so? And she said, the work was there the next day when I got there.
Yep.
It was still my business, but I got to see my husband, I got to see my daughter, I got to have a great time. And so that I was just ultimately proud of, right? That all it is taking the first step. It's scary. It absolutely is scary, Look, taking 4 weeks off, 6 weeks off is just as scary as taking the first week off. I'm telling you, it doesn't change. But think about that. Just schedule a dinner reservation at 6 o'clock every night of the week that you have to be there at a restaurant that you know you want to go to, and tell your spouse or significant other that we're going to dinner,
I
right?
love it.
Just and so you're scheduling something that must be painful if you miss. And so I remember my first coach in Atticus, and he told me that, what the fee was going to be for my hourly wage. And he said, you know why it's that fee, Josh? And I said, why? He said, because it's painful if you miss it, right? It's telling your spouse, I'm taking you to dinner tomorrow night, and then having to call and cancel is painful. So
Mm,
schedule things on your calendar that if you break it, it's painful. Because at that point, we're creating new pathways in your brain, right? So once it becomes normal that you leave the office every day at 6 o'clock, after a few weeks of doing that, thinking about staying till 7, 8, 9 o'clock becomes painful the opposite way. You're like, no, I go home at night. I want to do that. So that's what I would tell anyone that's saying, I can't do this. This is a stupid idea. This guy must not run the same type of practice area as me. Look, don't let your practice run your life.
yep.
Take control of your calendar. You can absolutely schedule. And my point is, maybe it's 2 nights a week you schedule to get out of the office. Maybe it's not 5. On the weekends, take your spouse or significant other away and go out of town. Spend the bucks to go to another hotel 30 minutes away. And I promise you, you do that enough times, you will realize I don't want to work weekends anymore, and I'm not going to.